Thanks everyone for joining us. I know it's been a while since we've done a KRTD chat. We were busy with the summit and we were busy with all this other stuff, but now we're back with a KRTD chat. And who better to bring on KRTD chat than Andrew from Action for Assange for a first one? There was just a bombshell story released in the Assange case. You wouldn't a story you wouldn't believe. This pretty much discredits the entire case. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. It basically discredits like one of the last pieces that they had left in the case that they were holding on to.
So what happens now? So we got this case.
So just to go through real quick some of the things that have already happened that should be more than enough to throw this case out, right? And the big one is the UC Global and the CIA spying on Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy. So for people who don't know what happened with that, Sheldon Adelson, the hopefully dead Zionist billionaire, who was the owner of the Las Vegas Sands casinos, was working with UC Global, a private intelligence and security, basically like a private military company out of Spain that was owned by David Morales. And the reason all of this is relevant is because Sheldon Adelson was one of Trump's biggest donors, funding his 2016 campaign. And so Sheldon Adelson and David Morales were working with the CIA because UC Global was tasked by the Ecuadorian government to protect the embassy. That was like their mission for the embassy. They were actually hired by the nation of Ecuador originally. Then David Morales, the owner of that private security firm, UC Global, made software that worked in tandem with the security systems that were set up for the Ecuadorians, and gave a backdoor to it to the Central Intelligence Agency. So it allowed the CIA to have access to all of Julian's confidential meetings and all of these other things that were taking place throughout the embassy. And it went as far as the UC Global staff installing microphones in the women's bathroom and the bathrooms throughout the building. Because you have to remember, this was about the size of a house. The Ecuadorian embassy, it's not this like lavish thing. It was literally like a 4-bedroom house in the corner of a street in downtown London. So the UC Global wired it all up for cameras and gave all of that access to the CIA. The CIA in turn then had access to all of the meetings that Julian had with his lawyers. According to Max Blumenthal in January, one of the developments in the UC Global case was that the CIA used it to interrupt Julian trying to get a diplomatic status from a third country. I don't know which country it is, but there was another country, not Ecuador or the UK, that Julian was trying to become a diplomat for. I have my speculations, but either way, the CIA essentially interrupted that with these indictments that came out by leaking them early into the press. I believe it was as early as like 2018 when information about this indictment came out originally. So the CIA literally spied on Julian while he was meeting with his lawyers. Julian went as far as, I don't know if anyone's seen V for Vendetta, but they had those little triangles that had the little red light that were white noise machines. So it makes an inaudible noise that only affects microphones. It makes a really loud, staticky white noise that people can't hear. It's like a dog whistle, but for microphones. And so Julian used a white noise machine to overcome the recording equipment by the CIA and UC Global. So what they did is they installed a laser microphone on the window panes. So they put a sticker on the window that they shot a laser beam at from one of the apartments rented across the street. And then used that to continue. It's absolutely dystopian. It's crazy. Use that to continue spying on Julian while he was in the embassy. So that's big thing number one, right? Is that the CIA was in the room while Julian was meeting with his lawyers about this very case, as early as 2017, if not earlier than that. And the judge said, that's okay. When Julian was taken out of the embassy, His personal belongings, legal materials, paperwork and effects, computers, cell phones were all given by the Ecuadorian government to the FBI or to the US government. So that's a conflict of interest. You can't illegally seize everyone's or someone's personal material that they were using in a case and then reference it and talk about information and those kinds of things. So that's another violation of like legal privacy violations that should have the case thrown out. On top of it being a First Amendment case, like it's very basic journalism what he was doing.
Right.
So those are just three things. There's a bunch more, but those are the three big
Sure.
ones. Press
But
freedom, CIA spying, U.S. government got his personal belongings without warrants and such.
let's.
Now this one is
Mhm.
very interesting because the way that they set up Julian's persecution or his trial, if we can call it that, is there were 17 counts under the Espionage Act, which are very vapid, very political charges.
Mhm.
And then there was one count under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act charge, which experts in law, I am not one, will say that it's so vaguely written that turning on a computer violates the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act charge, just with the vague language of the way the bill is written. And part of this, so that charge originally came out in 2019 when Julian was arrested.
Yes.
Under what we can call the first indictment. At that time, it only included information about potential conversations between Julian and Chelsea. They later expanded it after arresting him to include more Espionage Act charges, a larger scope of the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, but it's still focused on the time frame of Chelsea Manning. This latest one, that's known as generally the third indictment, came out in June of 2020, and
Mhm.
Julian wasn't arrested for it until September of 2020 when the witness portion of his trial started. So this is the third indictment that came out in sequence that Julian just got arrested for last September. So it's a real weird timeline. It's kind of convoluted, but
Mhm.
this is the third indictment that they put out, expanding the scope. And they included this information from a person named Seeger Thordenson,
Right.
commonly called Teenager, who was an FBI informant and essentially worked to try to catch Julian up on a Computer Fraud and Abuse Act charge. As an informant, he essentially lied about trying to get Julian to help him hack into things. He lied about what Julian told him to do, like as far as like, hey, you should attack the Icelandic government and things like that. But this is where, if we want, we can go into the slides.
Right. Before that, I want to go into a couple of things before that. So let's.
Yeah.
So for everyone who doesn't, the Iraq war logs is the reason everybody that they're going after Julian. One of the main reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a couple of other reasons not to like him. The Hillary Clinton emails, exposing all kinds of different things for years.
Yeah. While he was in, so Russiagate happened in response to the DNC email releases that showed that Bernie Sanders was cheated, and then continued through the release of Podesta's emails. Like that's kind of the origins of Russiagate, as Hillary's and the DNC's emails coming out. While Julian actually was under surveillance by the UC Global in 2017, after he had no political home because Republicans were very vapid on him, Democrats just thought he was like a puppet of Putin, right? He releases Vault 7, which is all of the spying tools by the CIA, NSA, that are actually being used in our world currently, which was warned about in 2017 for all of these ransomware attacks that we're hearing about. It's these tools that Julian tried to warn the world about 4 years ago that are now being used to attack U.S. infrastructure, if we believe the story the way it's written.
So what I'm assuming their biggest fear is he gets this case gets thrown away. and he gets to go free, and he's going to continue exposing things like he did for the last certain amount of time, and very possibly go after some of the people who went after him for this as well.
Well, I don't personally think of Julian as like a. I don't know him. I've never met him. I can't speak.
Well, no.
But I don't think he would be inherently vindictive. I
Well,
don't think
no,
he would
but
go after an individual because they were an individual involved necessarily, because he
well, maybe
doesn't
not.
collect the information. It's just given to him. But I definitely think he would keep publishing.
So he'd likely go back to WikiLeaks. I'm going to listen.
Yeah, yeah. But the cool thing, so after Vault 7 and the cyber tools got released, a few months later, he actually released Hillary Clinton's personal private emails from that server. That was like the hoopla in 2016. So that was when like the fire got lit in the embassy, I guess you could say.
And some of these so-called journalists, for example, I think I don't want to misquote, but I believe it was George Stephanopoulos, who everybody knows him. He was the press. I think he was a secretary, one of the cabinet positions for Bill Clinton. He recently, it was either a couple nights ago or a couple weeks ago, did a segment about Julian and completely smeared him and said, "Oh well, he fabricated and then he made it about the emails and said that something about him fabricating the emails and all this other stuff." So now the mainstream media, when they do cover it, if they go on the defensive and they make sure to paint him in a very negative picture, and especially that one is personal because that guy's directly linked with the Clintons. So
in a world that makes sense, 10 years from now, it will be studied in academic courses about the use of propaganda for how Julian was dragged through so many different communities that supported him over the last decade. Everything from like right wingers, like calling him a Mossad agent, to Democrats calling him a Russian agent, to he's a rapist, to he hurt people, he revealed sources, all of these other things that were used to target different support groups. So that's, in the future, that will be something that hopefully, if we live in a sane world, will be dissected for future generations. So that way this doesn't happen again.
And go back 10 years. I think it's about 10 years. A room full of liberals applauded him.
He gave a TED talk, yeah.
Everybody
gave
forgets.
a TED talk where they were jokingly calling him a hero or a supervillain. And he was like, well, I guess it depends if you commit war crimes.
And everybody forgets about that.
Yep.
But let's get into this slideshow that you brought here.
Yeah, so key witness in the Assange case lies about the indictment. A major witness in the United States Department of Justice case against Julian Assange has been admitted to be has fabricated key accusations in the indictment against the WikiLeaks founder. The witness, who has a documented history of sociopathy and has received several convictions for sexual abuse of minors and wide-ranging financial fraud, made an admission in a newly published interview in Stundin, where he also confessed to having continued a crime spree while working with the Department of Justice and FBI and receiving a promise of immunity from prosecution. The man in question, Sigurd Thortensen, was recruited by U.S. authorities to build a case against Julian Assange after misleading them to believe that he was previously a close associate with his. In fact, he had volunteered on a limited basis to raise money for WikiLeaks in 2010, but was found to have used the opportunity to embezzle more than $50,000 from the organization. Julian Assange was visiting Thorstensen's home country of Iceland around the time due to his work with the Icelandic media and members of the parliament in preparing the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, a press freedom project that produced a parliamentary resolution supporting whistleblowers and investigative journalism. Next slide. The US officials presented an updated version of an indictment against him to the magistrate courts in London last summer.
We don't have the next slide on the screen yet. If you want to wait a second. Okay, there we go.
But so I'll break down that first one then.
Yeah, let's break down. Let's go back to the first slide. We'll break that down. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, he still has the second one up. Let's see.
Yeah, but go back to the first one.
Sorry.
The first one. Second. Yeah, there we go.
No, the very beginning. That one.
We'll get there.
So Sigger, also known as Siggy or as Teenager, Teenager's the name that they used for him in the indictment, is literally just a masterclass piece of shit troll. I guess that would be the best way to describe him. He's someone who is a pedophile, who is a documented, registered sociopath, like has sought like things to make sure that he is known to be a sociopath in society. And he was working as an FBI informant. While he was an FBI informant, he continued his crime spree of pedophilia, specifically because he was going to be given immunity from the FBI under Julian's prosecution.
Of course.
Right? And then while he was at WikiLeaks, the only role that he actively took in the organization was as essentially just a campaigner to fundraise for him. And it was at a super limited basis. He wasn't like involved personally or in deep contact with Julian, as far as I'm aware. And then while he was doing that, he literally was just siphoning money off and using it for his own personal benefit.
So did he get his, my question here is, and I'm not even sure about this part of the story,
Mhm.
did he end up getting his immunity before he said what was actually going on?
Well, so all I know is that it was promised. I don't know if they actually gave it to him. So an interesting part of the story, there was 9 FBI agents in Iceland actively working with him. He had a whole FBI team in Iceland that the Icelandic government kicked out. They literally said, get the fuck out of here, and threw, sorry, I don't know if we can cuss, but threw
Yeah, no problem.
9 FBI agents out of their country and back to the United States, specifically because they were working hand in hand with Teenager.
Now, this story, I've only seen covered in a couple of places. I've seen it covered in the Icelandic place you mentioned. I've seen it covered, I believe, by Jimmy Dore covered it. Kyle Kalinske covered it. And there's like 3 other people who I saw, and then Indy Left also covered it. But other than that, nobody's talking about this.
Well, there was a couple other people, like Luke Radowski at We Are Change covered it, my buddy Jason Burmis, and a few others. But as a whole, you are correct. This is not something that has broken into the mainstream media.
I can count the amount of people. Yeah,
Right.
Kit covered
And
it.
my personal opinion is if you look at Operation Mockingbird that was taking place, where they were literally taking over the CIA and the Department of Justice, essentially were taking over media organizations. These major media institutions literally have former intelligence agency officers on all the time as guests, right? Like MSNBC, CNN, even Fox News to some extent brings on former military officials, former intelligence officers to get those monsters' opinions on this. So when you have leaders of the FBI going on major media platforms as friends to give their critical opinions instead of being pressured and talked to, you get an environment where the mainstream media is not going to cover a story where 9 FBI agents were found out to be helping a convicted pedophile that stole $50,000 and then the FBI got thrown out of the nation of Iceland. Like,
although Democracy Now! Actually,
yes.
there's another one covered it.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily even consider them mainstream.
Well, no, they're not mainstream, but
so if you look at Democracy Now's numbers, like views that they get, that video where they interviewed Julian's dad and brother and talked about this case got more views than any of their other videos that they've played. Anything that they put out recently. And that's because they've been such a bad publishing institution, where they literally just took the Russiagate narrative full throat and ran with it. So hopefully places like Democracy Now! will realize that their true audience, like the people that built them, that know what's happening in the world, want real information. So hopefully that's something that they can
exactly
fathom from this story.
The Intercept, I don't think.
No, well, so The Intercept sucks. Yeah.
Although I think
The Intercept is a
Democracy
step worse
Now!
than Democracy Now! To be fair.
I
So
think
not to get off topic too much, but just because it came up in our community recently, like the Free Assange whistleblowing community, um, the Intercept tried to put out, yeah. Well, so the Intercept has been found out that they fund Bellingcat, a private and basically a UC Global-esque company, like a private security contractor. The Intercept gives them more money than the UK government does, and the UK government gives them a lot of money. And does workshops, literally sends their journalists to a private security firm to go learn how to do journalism, which is like the opposite. Like you would want to be investigating private security firms as a journalist. But so they tried to literally cause a hubbub in the Free Assange community. They did a wonderful interview with Chelsea Manning, like completely admitted it's worth listening to just because it made me happy to hear her happy. But they tried to use it as a way, just as this story about teenager was coming out, to cause drama in the whistleblowing community by the way that they even spun and presented that story.
exactly the way I'm looking at it right now. Democracy Now! Might be in that hole with TYT and the Intercept, but the Democracy Now! Can still climb out of that hole.
Right.
The Intercept and TYT can no longer climb out of that hole.
No.
Democracy Now! Is still dangling by a thread.
Yeah, at least I
And
hope.
they still
This
have
is
the
either like a
opportunity.
last flash in the pan or like the start of actually cooking up against tyranny again. But we'll see.
Exactly.
We'll see which way it goes.
But yeah. But again, this is something I can count on my hand. The amount of people on both my hands. To be fair, the amount of people who cover this.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
sad.
scary. It really is.
And I want to address the chat for a second. You mentioned, I think this is in response to you saying in a world that makes sense. So Beth B says, in a world that makes sense, Julian would never have been persecuted.
I agree. And much love to you, Beth. I was actually, so shout out to what me and Beth were doing before this. I have another project where I'm working in conjunction with a bunch of smaller groups to form a much larger protest DC on September 11th. So it's going to be a multifaceted Free Assange, but also End the Damn Wars protest. So that's supposed to be the day that like the troops are coming home and all this bullshit, right? The stories that were being sold. So we're on September 10th, 11th, and 12th in DC, doing a full weekend of anti-war, anti-censorship events. You can find that on endthedamnwars.com. It's pretty cool. Or endthedamnwars.org. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I had the honor of in the home run tour. So Julian's dad went coast to coast and then back. And I had the privilege of organizing the Columbus event. We were outside of the Columbus State House towards the end of June. There's probably about 50 of us, and we gave about 2 to 3 hours of speeches outside of it. We invited every House and Senate member. And
Did any actually show up?
Sent a staffer. None of them sent someone to see what we were doing while they were all in the building behind security fences.
So nobody showed up from the House or the Senate.
Yeah, no single politician had the balls to show up to an event where we're asking for a journalist to not be tortured.
Oh, not even some. So I would assume that.
I hope they put a file in the baseball bat that Julian got. You know, if he just chews through it, he should be able to be out by next Wednesday. You know.
Yeah. But we invited Nina Turner relentlessly too, and because I'm actually sitting in the district she's running in Cleveland right now. But she's running for Congress, like House of Representatives for the United States. So we actually reached out to her a whole bunch and got nothing. So that was pretty disappointing too.
Now let me ask you, what are the politicians in this? Have any politicians publicly spoken about Assange?
So in the United States,
yes,
there has the major ones. So last Congress session, 2020, you had Thomas Massey and Tulsi Gabbard co-sponsor 3 pieces of legislation. One of them was to essentially give Snowden immunity and allow him to re-enter the country. One of them was to drop all the charges against Julian Assange, and beautifully, mind you, wrote out everything that's happened to him since 2000 and I think it was 8 actually. So in the congressional record, there is a detailed report of what they've done to Julian over the last over decade, 13 years. And then there was a third piece of legislation put forward that Gabbard and Massey put out together, specifically designed to change the Espionage Act, to essentially nullify the Espionage Act as the way it stands right now. Which I think that was a great piece of legislation. You had 2 congressmen sign on to it. You had Matt Gaetz, I think his name is.
The AM?
Let me see if I can find the other one. I should have it right on hand here.
And those are 2 mavericks who you're referring to, Thomas Massey and Tulsi Gabbard, not your typical Democrat or your typical Republican politician.
Right. So Gabbard and Massey wrote the legislation, and then it was co-sponsored by Matt Gaetz and Justin Amash.
Well, Justin Amash is not typical, but Matt Gaetz is pretty typical. So that one surprises me.
Yeah.
That, like, when the first 3, when you said Matt Gaetz, I was a little bit thrown. Now, have any of the presidential candidates who are allegedly free speech activists and allegedly on the left, have any of them spoken about it? Have Bernie Sanders said anything?
No, so funny enough, we had someone that was part of our crew a while ago that got like Bernie Sanders and most of the congressional reps or most of the presidential hopefuls to go on record talking about Julian. And the best we got out of Bernie Sanders is, "Not now, I can't talk about that now," and then just walks on.
Okay, what about, let's go through a couple of them. What about Elizabeth Warren? Does she have anything to say about it?
I don't think so. So I don't know if you know this. Do you know how Elizabeth Warren got her start in politics? You know where she comes from?
I know she did the CFPB, and she was a professor and did a study, and I know she was in the Republicans organization. Know all about it. Yeah.
So I don't know if you know what in response, she actually got elected in response to the bailouts. She was more or less one of the Occupy Wall Street candidates, so to speak, that got arrested. I can't remember his name now. If you look up the documentary, The Internet's Own Boy, there's a retelling of the story of Aaron Swartz. It's free on YouTube, The Internet's Own Boy. And he was one of the people that actually, she rode his coattails to the United States government as someone that was running to make sure that we could never bail out a single financial institution or mega corporation again. And it was, she got elected out of his movement, and he's someone that later committed suicide while in federal detention.
Yeah, her story is really interesting. I like her story up until recently. I liked her story. Like, that's with her, that she did the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She shamed Obama into doing that, and that was all great. And then you get to where in the last couple of years, and it's like, you're not really the same person. Well, not even, she's better than that, but she's not. But the thing is, she's not the same person who came into the Senate a couple of years ago. But none of them are.
Not at all.
Well, the thing is, again, none of the people who are in the Senate now are the same person they were when they came in on day 1.
Right. Or maybe that's a story about what they were doing to get there.
Not in the U.S. Because everything is backwards here. We persecute journalists. We have all the corporations donated to our, to our politicians. We're living in a backwards country in a lot of ways. Well, yeah. So
you want to jump into the third slide?
Third slide. Let's go to that.
Yeah, it's the one that we're on. The one that's up. Cool.
So, I have a camera glitch over here.
Presented an updated version of an indictment against Julian to the Magistrates Court in London last summer. That's that June 2020 indictment that he got arrested for in September. The veracity of the information contained therein.
Is my camera working now? Great.
Sorry.
Oh, it said in my camera. Good now.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the veracity of the information contained therein now directly contradicts the main witness statement and whose testimony it's based on. The court document referred to Mr. Thordenson simply as teenager, a reference to his youthful appearance, not his age, and Iceland as NATO country one, but makes no real effort to hide the identity of either. They purport to show that Assange instructed Thordenson to commit computer intrusion or hack in Iceland. In fact, Thordenson now admits to Stundin that Assange never asked him to hack or access phone records of the MPs, which is the parliamentarians. Um, his new claim is that he had in fact received some files from a third party who claimed to have recorded MPs and then offered to share them with Assange without having any idea what they actually contained. He claimed he never checked the contents of the files or even if they contained audio recordings, as his third-party source suggested. He further admits the claim that Assange had instructed or asked him to access computers in order to find such recordings is false. So the second half, or the 18th out of 18 indictments, falls apart with this. This is all that they had. So these next couple, I'll just jump in here and pick up if you want to go to number 4 or 5, I think it is. This just kind of shows the activities that Thordenson was taking. So these are pulled, that's what the 44, 45, 46, these are the lines from the actual indictment that was released in June of 2020 against Julian. This is the actual lines from that itself. But on January 21st, 2010, after Assange and Teenager failed in their joint attempt to decrypt a file stolen from an Icelandic bank, Teenager asked a US person to try to do so. In 2011 and 12, that individual, who has been an acquaintance of Chelsea Manning since early 2010, became a paid employee of WikiLeaks and reported to Assange and Teenager. No later than the summer of 2010, Assange put Teenager in charge of operating, administering, and monitoring the WikiLeaks IRC chat channel. Skip down to 46. In September 2010, Assange directed Teenager to hack into the computer of an individual formerly associated with WikiLeaks and delete chat logs containing statements by Assange. If you skip to the next one, later in December 2010, Laurel, a hacker supposedly affiliated with Anonymous, who identified herself as a member of the hacking group Gnosis, contacted Teenager. She introduced Teenager to other members of Gnosis, one particular by the name of Kayla. Teenager Siggy told this hacker that he was in charge of recruitment for WikiLeaks and stated that he was under Julian's authority and to report to him and him alone. So what Teenager was essentially doing behind the scenes in those first 3 points was essentially trying to build a case against Julian, the same way that, if you remember, 2016 Guccifer 2 was trying to, essentially inserting themselves into a situation to try to share material that would get someone a Computer Fraud and Abuse Act charge.
That's basically social engineering, where you basically integrate yourself into something, and
Right.
everybody thinks you're their friend.
Right. And even the things here about hacking into other people's computers to delete chat logs, that's part of the thing that he said, no, that didn't actually happen. But then in the part that it gets concerning is the December 2010, where you see Teenager actually start going behind the scenes and trying to essentially build a hacker community for WikiLeaks, in so many words, in response to the FBI or in conjunction with the FBI. Do we still have that slide up, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52?
Well, we have 49 through 52.
Okay.
Oh, 48 through 52.
2011, a teenager told Julian that a group of hackers offered their services. And Assange supposedly, but this has been debunked as well, approved of the arrangement and told him to meet with Gnosis. If you jump down to 52, February 11th, 2011, a teenager provided Assange with a computer code that Kayla had from a hacked US cybersecurity company, and told Assange that it came from Gnosis. So this is more of that social engineering activity, more of that planting, trying to get someone to plant something inside of WikiLeaks to get them to commit an illegal act. And then I don't want to read too much more of this because it really just drones on.
But everyone can see it for themselves on the screen. So,
but if you jump to the next slide, number 55 is the important thing I'd like to point out. On February 17th, 2011, a teenager told Laurel that WikiLeaks is the world's largest hacking organization. So he was essentially laying the foundation for the next FBI operation that they start to get into towards the end of this indictment. If you go to the next slide, I won't read through all of it. I'll just read through the last one here, or the 63. But after receiving Assange's approval to establish a relationship between WikiLeaks and LulzSec, teenager made contact with Topiary on June 16th, 2011, going through Laurel. To show Topiary that teenager spoke for WikiLeaks, so an arrangement could be reached between WikiLeaks and LulzSec, teenager posted a YouTube video, then quickly deleted it of his computer screen that showed a conversation that he was having with Topiary. And the video also contained Julian sitting there, which that actually isn't true. That's a fake video. They talk about that in the indictment as well. And one of the New York Post or Times or one of those put the video in the article when it came out, and the leader or the head executive editor of Consortium News actually said that, I'll have to find the article, but it was like the New York Post or New York Times or somebody used a fake video that was posted to the internet, which was super interesting. But the reason that this slide is so important is it bridges into the next era of WikiLeaks with its involvement in the United States. And LulzSec, for people who don't know, and I would actually recommend another documentary for this. It's called We Are Legion, the story of the hacktivists. LulzSec was another group that was infiltrated by the FBI and headed up, essentially, like the public face of it was a gentleman by the name of Sabu, who was a blatant FBI agent once everything came into the public. And this is the part of the story where it bridges into the Jeremy Hammond case and the UC Global files. Or not UC Global, I'm sorry, the Global Intelligence files. Because there was a major U.S. organization that Jeremy Hammond, who actually just recently got out of prison about 18 weeks ago or so, released through WikiLeaks. But so an FBI informant was working in conjunction with an FBI informant with the development of LulzSec to try to get Julian with Computer Fraud and Abuse Act charges, was essentially their operation. But if you remember from the Stundin article that we just covered, they talked about how teenagers stole $50,000 from WikiLeaks. The court document, which this is pulled out of, conveniently leaves that off. So all they put, line 66, in the fall of 2011, teenager left WikiLeaks. They don't include the fact that he stole $50,000. They don't include the fact that pedophile, sociopath, offered immunity, FBI informant, but also that he was literally convicted of stealing money from WikiLeaks. Like, Icelandic court found him guilty of stealing $50,000, and the court just was like, well, he just left. Like they
Well, what
wrote,
they want to do is they want to paint a picture here. They want to paint a picture. This is the witness who's coming up against his son. So when
right.
MSNBC talks about this and they pull their sources, or CNN talks about this, they pull their sources. Oh, there's a guy and he went through all this and now he's testifying against his son. So that's as simple as that.
hmm
They don't have to tell you all the other stuff.
Right. It's crazy, and that's if they'll even cover it. Like I think
If
the
they cover.
closest that it's actually come to mainstream media coverage was Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball talking with John and Gabriel Shipton about it. That was
Mhm.
like the closest that ship ran to getting stream coverage. Yeah, he did go on Tucker, but I think that was before the Stundin article. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that was earlier in June before all this came out. I'll
That's
have to double
true.
check.
And
But
when I do see them cover it, they attempt to spin a narrative like I saw with a couple of these different reporters a couple times, especially a lot of the people who worked for on TV who have connections with the Clinton White House. A lot of those people, like Stephanopoulos, etc., will spin their narratives, and it looks exactly like they're doing it. If you actually know the full story and you know as much as it looks like they're spinning a narrative and they're pushing back, and a lot of the times they make it about the emails, and they don't talk about the Iraq war logs.
oh, right, it's the same thing. Like if you look at how they treat everything, it's the same thing as like the DNC emails. Like they don't talk about what is actually in the information. They just smear and attack the person that put it out.
And the way I think Stephanopoulos said once that Julian I quote fabricated the emails. I think that's one of the things that he said at one.
That'd be interesting because they're actually the only press institution with 100% accuracy rating. Like they put out more classified information than any other press organization ever in the history of the world. And they've never had to retract a single email, a single document, a single attachment,
I'm sure that
ever,
CBS, that's where he is, right? He's at CBS. I'm sure CBS has had to retract hundreds, if not thousands, of things.
constantly. Even I have to correct myself half the time in real time on my show because I'll get a date or a time or something wrong.
And it's a lot of the people who are connected to the Democratic establishment will talk about it. Specifically, people connected to the Clintons I've seen talking about it.
hmm And well,
And
so there's a lot of people that I don't know, like think, I guess, like if you talk to like the more liberal Democrat end of the spectrum, that they're like, oh, Joe Biden took office, so Julian's for sure going to get out because Obama and Biden didn't want to prosecute him, right? But because of the New York Times problem, to be fair. Um, but when the one time it got brought up in the White House room, the press secretary was literally like, "Well, there it's already in court, like it's playing out." So Biden is taking the same position that Obama took on the Minnewachuny protesters, which is we'll just see how it plays out.
no, I like. I'm not sure if you've seen. I know that. I think we talked about this off the air. I had mentioned that Kyle Kalinske put up the phone number when him and Crystal interviewed the two brothers, the brother
hmm
and the father. They put up the phone number for the White House and said, we've all been trying to call senators and congressmen. Why don't we try calling the White House and have millions of people leave messages there and see what happens?
Yeah, do anything. Literally, like that's my slogan: is do what you can with the time and money that you have. For me, like this whole journey over the last 3 years, like started by putting posters up on telephone poles. I would go out and put basically 100 posters up a day for the first 6 months that Julian was in prison. Um, I would go pass out flyers. Like we just had the 4th of July. Some communities, I don't know if they still have fireworks happening or not. But Julian's birthday is actually the 3rd, so the day before. So we had been encouraging everybody to get out to their local 4th of July events just to pass out flyers and information. Because one of the things that Julian actually talked about was the idea that you become immune or you become uh, that when injustice happens, you become um, complacent and take inaction.
Mm-hmm.
So as you hear things happening in the world around you that are unjust, that are legitimately wrong things, We train ourselves to ignore those things. And the way to start doing is literally to do anything, whether you're an anti-war activist, whether you're a guns rights activist, whether you're a Medicare for all activist, no matter what the thing is you're starting for, the thing is that you're passionate about. Maybe you're not even an activist yet. If you go out and just start doing anything, like literally anything, passing out flyers, putting up posters, literally just talking to people at events, you start to remove those levels of inaction from yourself. So when things do start happening in the world, you become more aware and more in a position to be able to push back against those injustices. So my hope is that anybody listening is willing to do that, to just literally pick up a flyer for whatever it is you care about and hand it to a stranger and say, hey, have you heard about X, Y, or Z issue? Because 3 years down the road, 10 years down the road, if you keep fighting for that thing, you never know where it's actually going to end up.
And on a lot of these issues, that those flyers might actually help. A lot of people don't understand what Julian actually did. A lot of people don't understand what Medicare for All actually is.
Mhm.
And when you start to educate people, and they maybe start to come around to your side because they start to understand, oh, maybe you're right about that.
Yeah,
I've talked,
I think it's super important because it
I've, mm,
like back in the day, right? So we live in an era of information warfare. I don't know if that's like a common thing people are aware of, but the mainstream media tries to spin narratives to sell us products or sell us wars or sell us politicians, what have you. So any action you take as an individual to bring someone truth, like literally, even if it's just about Medicare for all, is revolutionary. Like that act of telling someone the truth is like incalculable how impactful it could be in the world, right? Because billionaires and the hyper moneyed elite, if you look back at George Soros's 60 Minutes interview that he did decades ago, he has the same opinion, but he puts it into words, the same actions that all billionaires do. And it is, if I don't ravage this country, someone else will. Right. So the assumption of the billionaire intelligentsia elite class that wages war for profit is, if I don't do this, someone else will do this. But people like us, the activist class, the way we have to look at it is, if we don't do this, no one else will. If I'm not the person passing out information locally, there's not going to be a person passing out information locally. So I think that that's, once people can get that to click, it really becomes a big turning point in that fight against injustice and inaction.
and with Assange, a lot of people think I talked to about a lot of people who are met to the liberal spectrum of the Democratic Party, and a lot of them, I asked, hey, you know what happened with Assange? A lot of them will say, yeah, he released the emails or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of response I get. Nobody really knows the full story with the Iraq war logs. Nobody remembers the TED Talk. Nobody remembers anything except, yeah, I think he released some emails, and WikiLeaks, I think, is connected to Russia.
Yep.
And that's all I get.
Yep. And that's the struggle, right? Like that's the problem, is that they've buried this for so long and for so many incalculable reasons that are just pure evil. Like they want to find ways to go demolish nations and bring back slavery for profit, for weapon sales. Like that's something people can't put themselves into a position of, because the average sane person isn't going to kill a child for $1. So it's just it's terrifying that the world has turned into this, where a decade ago Julian was looked at as the anchor, like the front line of press freedom, and it's turned into him now being tortured for the last 3 years in a black site prison in the middle of downtown London.
No, and then some people have said, oh, well, somebody offered him asylum. Yeah, he can't get there.
Right. Well, horrifyingly, right? So he got offered asylum by the nation of Mexico. President AMLO in Mexico. Well, I don't know if you know much about Mexican politics, but
I
he
know he's
was like
kind
the
of a
Bernie
lefty.
Sanders of Mexico, right? Like the
Yeah.
labor leader, socialist or democratic socialist reformist, taking our country back for the people leader, like very Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
The
that I know.
Mexican labor unions, specifically, I think it was the auto workers, organized and forced AMLO to come out in support of Julian Assange in 2019 or early 2020. The Mexican president was one of the first presidents of South America to speak out in defense of Julian. And then fast forward a little bit, one of Julian's friends and an anonymous member who goes by the name Commander X got political asylum in Mexico. This is a story that my buddy Steve over on Slow News Day is covering endlessly because of how crazy it is. But so Commander X was living in Mexico for a little over a year, had a little Friends of X committee, a very meager living, barely had internet access for a guy that used to do really high-end computer stuff,
Hmm.
would be the way to describe it. About 3 weeks ago, the United States government sent a group of armed US people to go and violate the political asylum of Commander X, illegally remove him from Mexico, and rendition him into a United States prison where he's at right now. So even the offer of asylum by a country like Mexico isn't even possible anymore because the US has no regard for any international order or law, where even
So,
political asylum by a third country like Mexico no longer holds any weight whatsoever.
well, that's the thing. And the other thing is, here's an interesting question. If we had a different president, let's say we had a, let's go, not even say Bernie Sanders, let's say we had a president. Well, let's start with a President Bernie Sanders. Do you think a President Bernie Sanders could be pressured into supporting Julian Assange and, you know,
So
giving
that's
him.
actually a really fun thought experiment, right?
Hmm?
So the story, if you believe the mainstream media, is that Donald Trump won because Julian released the information on Podesta, right? That's the narrative of the world, in so many terms. Um, Before those emails that came out in October of 2016, there was the DNC emails that came out in June, July of 2016 that showed the Democratic National Committee structure was rigging the primary against Bernie Sanders. I think if then hopeful candidate, cheated, publicly proven cheated candidate Bernie Sanders would have taken a stand with those emails and held them up and said, I have the proof there on stage in 2016, we may have gotten here, but I don't think we would have. I think if Bernie Sanders would have had a spine in 2016 and took a stand with the same information that Donald Trump did later on in the campaign, we wouldn't have had a President Trump. We would have had a President Bernie. That's my not that he was helping Bernie or that
No,
was
right.
assisting Bernie.
My question though is, if we have, if in the 2020 election some miracle Bernie Sanders pulled out and won, do you think he would have pardoned Assange, or could he have been pressured to, as where Biden probably can't?
No, Bernie can't even get pressured to supporting Medicare for all in the middle of a global pandemic, and it's his own policy. So I don't think he would be pressured into supporting the person that Joe Biden advocated for essentially openly murdering by calling him a high-tech terrorist.
Let's try another experiment. Let's put, well, we already know the much more establishment candidates is an automatic. Now let's try someone who's on the more, I would say, who's very wishy-washy. Let's try an Elizabeth Warren. Do you think she could have been pressured? Because she's really wishy-washy on a lot of things. Can that be
I
used to
mean,
pressure
I
her?
think Elizabeth Warren would have made a better show about it.
Okay.
I think that she would have found better reasons than we're just going to see what happens. But I think no matter who gets elected, um, across the board in the Democrats, that Julian's situation wouldn't have changed coming into 2021. With the very faint exceptions of Tulsi Gabbard and who was that lady? The spiritual
Marianne Williamson.
Marianne
yeah,
Williamson.
because to her credit, Marianne Williamson was at the first event and maybe the second in Washington, D.C., with Julian's dad and brother.
Yeah.
So if anything, Marianne Williamson is the one candidate that's like progressed from saying like, I support free press, but I don't know about this Julian guy, all the way to sitting on a panel advocating for him and for his release
What do you
3
think?
years later. So at the very least, at least pressure on Marianne Williamson gets her to learn. So I appreciate that, but I think if she got elected, it wouldn't change anything, and Tulsi Gabbard included too.
What do you
I
think we
think she
should
wouldn't have
be
had.
focusing our efforts on?
I have one more
If
scenario to
not,
throw up. So
Yeah,
if
the
not more
senator
elect,
who just died, who ran for president, Mike Gravel. Where do you? I'm sure you're familiar with him. He
yeah.
did actually
So
run in 2020. Do you think he could have been a partner of Assange?
yes, 100%.
Okay.
yeah,
So Mike Ravel, rest in peace. He is a fucking freedom fighter and a hero. Um, his pro-war and intelligence stuff aside, Mike Gravel, as a sitting member of the U.S. Senate, worked with Daniel Ellsberg
yeah,
to put
Pentagon
um,
Papers,
the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record.
yeah,
He's someone that's spoken up for Julian. He's appeared on vigils for him
yeah. He had to
in the
go. He had to
past.
go in the middle of an alleyway in a dark room and put a
Hmm.
briefcase down and go. This is back before WikiLeaks could have just emailed it to you. This
Right.
was this was when it was way harder to do that, and he took much more of a risk. And
This is this is when Daniel Ellsberg tells the story about
he had
standing
to
there for
he
hours
had to put a
upon hours in a dark
colostomy
night
bag
in a
in.
FedEx making Xeroxed copies of
Yeah,
illegally possessed documents.
and he
Like
had
that, like that's an exciting story to
he
me.
had to
Oh,
run a filibuster with he had to go get a colostomy bag for him and the guy in the seat, right? And then he had
crazy.
to.
Did you watch the
See, the
Democracy
one
Now
thing
thing
is a
on him?
real man would have just shit his pants on stage.
Yeah, well, that's
Like,
what like Huey
I'm
P.
not
Long
getting a
used to
bag.
do.
Like if I ever get a chance to filibuster, like you all are
Yeah.
going to smell it. Like
Huey
that's
P.
part of
Long
the
used to
bag.
just piss onto the floor of the Senate when he did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
No, like for real, like
for
that's what
real.
an opposition
That's what they were
political
supposed.
party
Now,
do.
now
Like
it's the
fucking
silent.
Brazil, when their government was getting taken over by a right wing leader,
Yeah,
their actual left wing oppositions, like their versions of AOC, were setting off fucking tear gas grenades in Congress to try to stop pieces of legislation.
yeah.
So like
That's nutty.
we can have a real actual congressional resistance. We may not pass policy, but we can shut that shit down if we can get
Yeah.
one or two people.
If I ever get
Well, the
elected,
idea
I'm just
was
gonna have a balloon artist sit behind me and make balloon guillotines and pass them out, and just see if anyone starts changing
would
their
be
mind
fun.
on stuff. Right? Like give them that, and maybe a piece of cake. So it's like happy legislation day. Whatever, whatever it is, and just see who takes the bait. Just see
I like it.
who's willing
But
to
you
do
saw
that.
how the Tea Party, the idea with these lefties and Justice Dems was to be the Tea Party of the left, and you see how some of these guys act. They made John Boehner quit, and then you saw Ted Cruz all the way up until he got absorbed by the establishment. Even him,
I had a
doing that-
conversation about
they
this.
did that 2-day filibuster. Remember that? Like 3-day filibuster.
No, see, I had
Everybody-
a conversation about the Tea Party and how they relate to, third parties and the Justice Dems themselves, right? And the conclusion that the people I had talked to came to I run the Jimmy Dore server Discord in case people were wondering. That's where I had the conversation was that you need that threat of an actual party. You need the Tea Party who was capable of getting people on a ballot, right, and into a seat. Even if it was a mayoral seat.
Idea to that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Party. So the Tea Party, I personally live in the district that Jim Jordan lives in. He's like the Tea Party poster boy. Like he is what's left of the Tea Party movement, as far as I'm concerned. What the Tea Party movement's whole goal was, in a nutshell, was to move the Republican Party to the right. For whatever that means to whoever's hearing it, their goal was to move Republicans to the right on a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Whether it was issues of liberty, issues of taxes, issues of Wall Street. The whole idea was to move it to the right, and it was funded by billionaires.
Yeah.
Ocasio-Cortez, the Just Us Democrats, and Brand New Congress, referring to them as the Tea Party of the left, I think is super, super, super good, but not in the sense of what people think. because they moved the Democratic Party to the right.
Okay.
Like the Democratic Party now no longer has a serious elected stance on Medicare for all.
Right.
It's walked all the way back to Obamacare. Those same candidates now see Israel as a victim rather than as an apartheid state committing genocide. And they will now use, like, there was a gentleman who pointed out that Ocasio-Cortez had walked back her statements on Palestine,
Yep.
and she used the force of violence, the legal monopoly of violence that the Capitol Police hold, to get officers in a different state to show up at that guy's house saying that he threatened violence against Ocasio-Cortez. So there is an elected Democrat actively using state police to intimidate small Twitter political threats that make her look bad. So,
but what I mean by
in being
Tea
the
Party,
Tea Party of the left and moving the Democrats so far right that they were the Republicans of 1990.
But my thing is, what they were supposed to be, the type of Tea Party they were supposed to be, was the ones who went in there and said, "Yeah, I'm blocking that. Yeah, we're blocking this legislation. We're going to force this vote. We're going to block this. We're going to block that. I'm going to filibuster for the next 10 days. You're not going to do any of that." And who would actually go out there, and at the time of the Justice Democrats, there were 2018, let's say, we got more of them. They had the Jimmy Dore show at their disposal. They had TYT at their disposal. They had Democracy Now! At their disposal. They had all of these
I was
platforms.
working for both. I was working as a contractor for both Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress in 2018.
Yeah.
Like personally, like was working with a company that was doing a lot of their online advertisements for non-major candidates.
Right.
Imagine this, right? Imagine if AOC was blocking a bill, and on Monday night she went on TYT. On Tuesday night she went on Jimmy Dore. On Wednesday night she went on Democracy Now! On Thursday night she went on CNN and MSNBC and all of that. And then she kept saying, I'm blocking this bill, and that's what I'm doing, and I want all of you to come out here and support, or whatever she did. She had all of these microphones that she refused to use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something she had at that time.
I think there's a quote that I misquote all the time, but I think Malcolm X, right? And I think I just like my misquote better than the original quote, right? But it says something along the lines of a shepherd only accepts the sheepdog when the wolf exists, right? And we're acting like Justice Dims would have been able to go in there with no threat for to leave. Like if you make it in the Democratic Party and they aren't doing what you want them to do, and you don't have the threat to go, all right, well, I'm going to go do this other party then and see if I can get, if you don't have that, and that third party be viable enough to be a worry, right? If you have all the squad and Bernie Sanders about to jump ship because you're not going to do something on this or that, well, then what are the Dems going to have to do? Then that actually does what the Tea Party of the left was meant to do in moving the party to the left, like what we wanted, right? That you would have needed that. But, Jimmy tries to set these people up with an easy home run. Hey, block your vote. Do what you want after that. But block the vote here, right? And what did he get? Oh, he started getting smearing and Russiagate and whatever. Sounds like other people we were just talking about, right?
It's not even
because
just
he
that.
threatened the stability of people's positions.
Right,
like
absolutely.
He threatens the cozy leadership roles that want to just have that leadership role. Like it's how any institution turns from a democratic institution into a totalitarian institution.
Yeah.
And it's because the people in charge are content with the power that they've earned and will work to continue having and staying in positions of power, even if it's something as small and honestly bullshit as like the DSA and things like that, where instead of taking that common cause of what it's supposed to be and carrying it to the leadership position, you have people, most likely FBI or private intelligence operatives, honestly, that get in charge of these organizations and then just turn them into inert institutions that just spend time in an insular environment.
Well, the thing is that I think the DSA used to work with the Greens and PSL at one point. Now they're like, what if we made a closer relationship with the Democratic Party? No, that's not really where you want to be. But what I was going to say is, and the other thing, senators actually have a lot of power in their own right. They can block. They can literally. I believe it was. I can't remember who did it, but Josh Hawley $1,200 bill. Ron Johnson just blocked it.
One
So
senator can block any legislation from moving, can block every legislation from moving through the chamber.
so here's an
Um,
interesting thought.
yeah,
This
and one
is
House of Representatives member, interestingly, can actually block arms sales, where a House member or a Senate member, this is legislation from like Vietnam era, can file a contest against arms negotiation deals and hold up the actual negotiation of arms trades by demanding more and escalating levels of transparency and information. It's something that Rand Paul attempted to do against the Saudi Arabian arms sales in the beginning of the Trump era.
Now here's an interesting theory. Now this is something I talked about on the show months ago. Reef, I think you helped me set this up. The War and Wealth Tax Bill. I think you helped me with that slide.
Yeah,
And we
probably.
were talking about, hey, how does she? That's not really a serious bill, whatever. But here's an interesting thought. Chuck Schumer said, hey, you need to get a Republican to support that bill if we want to bring that up. She could have said, go fuck yourself. I'm going to block every single piece of legislation that comes through until you bring up my wealth tax bill.
Yeah.
You have a choice here. And then he has no choice. Like, all right, I'll bring up your wealth tax bill. But the other thing is, she'd have to probably do it at least once or twice before he realized she was serious about that. And any of these senators who have like a really progressive bill that doesn't want to be brought up, just say, you know what, I'm going to block all your legislation. No problem.
I honestly think it would be fun to be in one of those positions, literally just to cause escalating levels of buffoonery, essentially.
Mhm.
Like literally being one person with the ability to shut down an entire federal government would be phenomenal.
That's
But
what
I
Ted
don't think
Cruz
I'll ever
did.
be able to reach that position.
That's what Cruz did a couple years. He's like, he shut down the government.
Mhm.
With when Obamacare was going to go through, he said, yeah, this is not happening. We're not renewing. I'm shutting down the government. I'm going to talk for 24 hours about who knows what. I don't even know what he was talking about, but he kept talking.
Right.
And
Well, where's Bernie Sanders, real quick? Where's Bernie Sanders on shutting down every bill until Julian Assange gets free?
no, he's
He
not
has the
there.
power to do that. He's a sitting senator. He can say no legislation will move through the Senate until this thing that I'm standing on gets resolved. But there's no one in our government except Thomas Massey, and if the other two, Gates and Amash, got reelected. I don't know anything about them, honestly. Um, those three, if they're even still there, I know Massey is.
Amash is gone. He switched to Libertarian and decided not to even run again.
Okay.
He was the first Libertarian ever in Congress
Yeah.
because he switched to it while he was there.
But where are those people shutting down legislation? Where are those people filibustering over this issue?
Well,
Like,
they're
these are
afraid too.
basic, like supposed to be inalienable, God-given rights, and the people that support God, gun, and country aren't taking a stand on the First Amendment here, and it's just crazy. Like to the point that Ohio is a deep-ass red state. Like our House and Senate are beyond a supermajority Republican, and not a single one of those people would show up on a day they're in session to defend free speech or even to just listen and be educated.
Well, the thing is, we always think we're getting a fighter. We thought Elizabeth Warren did that little thing with the CFPB, so we're like, oh, great, she's a fighter. Turns out she's only a fighter when she's not a senator, and she
Right.
doesn't have to be friendly with everybody there. We
Right,
thought,
like Trump just put out that he's making some like critical free speech announcement, and I'm like, dude, I literally just broke into your fairgrounds and put up signs all across it telling you to free Assange. Like, don't tell me you're making a free speech announcement. Did I tell you guys about that?
oh, he did that?
Yeah, let me pull up these pictures. So Trump had his very first event in my county, in the place that I live, at a fairgrounds about 15 minutes from my house. Um, So let me grab these pictures. I'm gonna screen share. I don't know how well it'll pull up. Oh, I don't have links to them. It's just in a. It's just
So
in the
let's
feed.
screen share and see how this turns out. But while you're doing that, I was just gonna list off every senator. Well, I'm not gonna do it now, but I was gonna say I started with Warren. I was gonna go all the way up to Bernie and AOC. Every time we think somebody's a fighter, we were wrong.
Right. But yeah, no, I literally broke. It was open. It was not breaking. I walked in to the fairgrounds before Trump's event, about 48 hours beforehand, and put posters up across the grandstands, like basically everywhere. And then went back the next day or a couple days later during Trump's event, with my megaphone, which has a record option, that was just chanting "Pardon Julian Assange." And the traffic was stopped for like 5 miles. So I just walked past all of these cars with this megaphone and just got like thumbs up and shouts and cheers. And
Let me allow you to share screen.
I can share screen now.
Yeah, I didn't have it allowed. And I want to address the chat real quick. I don't know if you Joyce Caterzini, I don't know if you know them, says freedom and compensation for Julian Assange.
I'm trying to make sure I'm at the right part. There we go.
And then we have Beth B saying Bernie Sanders had the opportunity in 2016 to use leverage, but he caved to the DNC establishment. Yeah.
So is this coming through on the stream okay? So yeah, I literally went to the Lorraine County Fairgrounds the night before. I was putting up posters for Julian all across it. This is the back entrance. And then this is the actual me. I wanted to document that I broke nothing. The gate was just open. So I just straight walked in, postered and stickered all the bathrooms throughout the area. Went across the grandstands and put posters up on each one of the poles throughout it. Did it like a literature drop. Yeah. And then in the spirit of resistance, I sent the information to The Intercept and told them like, hey, this happened at Trump's event before he got there. I just wanted to make you aware, hoping that they would say something or something like that, but they didn't.
Have you considered emailing some of these guys directly?
I try, but there's literally like a list of people that we've reached out to for 3 years that no longer really get back to us. So we have the people that are in our group that still reach out to people, but it's
no, I mean like personal emails. Some of the Intercept reporters
every month for so long asking them to fight for issues they pretend to stand for that it becomes cartoony. Like
that's
I was
true.
for 2 years I was an elected member of the Ohio Green Party State Central Committee, and I called Nina Turner once a month asking her, hey, I would love to organize for Medicare for All for you. It's something we're doing here. We'll do it in a post-partisan way. We won't even talk about party. We just want to get the legislation on the board here in Ohio. Like, will you fight with us? And never got a phone call back, never got a text response. And I have like her personal cell phone number. So
really?
yeah.
And how did you get that out of curiosity?
I have friends and stuff, but
of course.
But so I reached out to her for the last 5 years of my life, maybe since 2017. No, 2016 as a pipeline fighter was when I first started reaching out to Nina Turner. And for the better part of a decade now, I've gotten no response.
Has she ever, maybe she doesn't check her phone messages. Do you ever text her?
She texted me back once. So she had a big gubernatorial victory, I believe in Alabama or somewhere. There was a big mayor's race or big governor's race. It may have been a mayor's race, but a big race that our revolution won. It was their first post 2016 election victory. And I texted her, I said, hey, congratulations. That was a really big victory. You guys did great. And she texted back, thank you. So I at least know that she receives them. Because if you block someone's phone number, you still go to voicemail. It doesn't stop the call completely.
So she knows, does she know what you're doing right now?
Yeah.
And is she
I have reached out to her, telling her what I'm doing. I have called her. I have texted her, like everything we can do. Like Misty, my wonderful Putin's buddy comrade, has reached out to her on Twitter endlessly. We've reached out to, I don't know if you know who Tara Samples is. She's like a local here in Ohio that is connected with Nina's campaign. So we've tried every which way to Sunday And we just get no response from her on any issue. So hopefully, so I don't even know hopefully, but like that's to me, Nina Turner's just of course. And Tim Black, but when you completely abandon all positions up the line of the Democratic Party, they'll start to give you attention. Interestingly enough, on Tim Black's show was where the book written by Donna Brazil was dedicated to Seth Rich, where she said that poor little baby, talking about Seth Rich's murder, and dedicated her book to him that talks about the DNC's rigging. So credit where credit's due. Tim Black did get that interview.
Have you considered reaching out? And you said the one time you guys, and you said that Bernie told you he didn't have time to talk about it. What happened with that?
Yeah. I'll try to find the video and send it to you off camera, but
what was
literally
it?
Bernie
What was
Sanders
your
like,
your little?
we don't have time to talk about it. Like, wouldn't say I support
Shane,
you. Like, had a camera and a person incessantly.
Yeah.
Like,
you
talk
spent.
about Julian. Hey, what about Julian Assange? This was back in 2000.
Oh, I gotta tell you, you know, you're familiar with David Pakman, right?
Yeah.
I want to pull something up real quick. Reef, can you? Is that still around? Can we pull it up?
Probably, yeah. Let me look.
We're gonna pull something up. So I actually asked David Pakman about Julian Assange in a super chat during one of his streams.
Okay.
Do you remember which Friday that was? By chance?
That's a good question. Which Friday was that?
Was it the last one?
Yeah.
Let me look.
I believe so. So
I'll look.
I asked David. So, and I mostly did. Hey, let me see what kind of segment I can get out of this. Does he support him? Does he not? I don't know if you're familiar with what his stance is on Assange. So.
I'm not.
So you're about to be. I'm not going to spoil it for you. We're going to pull the video up, but.
Cool.
It was Fourth Fridays, I do believe.
Mm-hmm.
And
so this is from
should be one of the last videos.
So this is, we're going to pull up a slideshow from one of our news show, and this has, and I think Andrew, you can see it already, but nobody else can.
Yeah, I got it.
So which video is it?
Whoop.
All right, let's pull this video up.
It's one of these three. Hold on.
Why don't we just, they're all fun. We can play them all.
Yeah.
Well, let's play.
Come on. Work with me, computer. Please and thank you. Any day now.
Okay. So here's what I asked him about Julian Assange. Down here.
And it wasn't the right one, so hold on. Let's try.
KR.
I think it was this one.
Let's see what Pakman has to say about Assange.
KRTD, hold corporate Dems as accountable as Republicans.
No, that's the wrong one. I did a couple things. I wanted it up for a segment, so.
Yeah.
I asked him a couple of things. Let's see.
Joe Biden is a neoliberal corporatist. If you're...
Yeah, he grammar Nazis him anyway.
That was a good one. Yeah, he's trapped there correcting my grammar.
This one.
Why are you afraid to support Assange? I really don't think about Julian Assange.
Yeah. He just doesn't think about him.
People with responses like that are people that will never share classified information and have no concern about being prosecuted because they have no hope of challenging power, right? Because the only reason you don't concern yourself, even in the slightest, like you don't, like I'm ridiculous. Like I've literally lived this case for the last 3 years of my life. Like I know almost every detail and I've learned every detail that has gone back like a decade almost, if not a little bit more. But for someone like him to be like, oh, I don't think about that much. You don't think about that much because you're not someone that's going to go to jail when this case goes through. Like the U.S. prosecution argued, if you share information against the national interest, you are in violation of the Espionage Act. That was their literal argument that they presented in court that a British judge accepted, right? So if Julian's allowed to be brought here, challenging power for any reason gets you turned into, now they're calling them domestic terrorists, right? So it's reasons like this why you need a free and independent media. And someone like that, if that's willing to be like, I don't think about this, even in the slightest, it's because they're either tools of the intelligence community or are literally just in it for a paycheck and don't care and don't plan on challenging any power ever.
Well, the thing I've noticed about David Pakman is when the left, about 4 years ago, the left was in a very different place.
Yeah.
The progressive left was over there with him. Now, when it was over there, about 4 years ago, everybody else moved at certain points. Everybody moved except for him, and he stayed still in the exact same place from 2016.
Mhm. Well, that's because that's where his money is, right? Like all of these, like it took, like I love Jimmy Dore, but it took Jimmy Dore until 2019, 2020 to even start calling out AOC, to even start calling out Bernie Sanders. Like it took 2 years of knowing that this man is evil, that this man is lying about the positions that he holds, right? To actually call him out. So like I'm not surprised that people like David Pakman are literally still just sitting there milking the Bernie cow, because that's how they made their money. That's what these people found as a product to sell. Like because he's nothing more than a salesman. Like he's not a journalist, he's not an analyst. He is literally selling his opinion to people gullible enough to buy it.
And he acts like that. He's like, I don't watch any other media, and that's what he says is, I don't watch any other media because I want to show you what I think. And he says it. Well, what you think isn't always really that interesting.
Right, and that just means you're not educated.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you're just
He's
not
like,
willing
If
to
you're
learn.
not paying attention to other issues, it means that you have no idea what's happening.
So yeah, and I want to pull up another. I hate to say, I
You
want to
good?
pull up the first clip.
Oh,
So I want to
now
pull up
that
the first clip. Yeah, and I was going to before, but you were kind of getting out of it.
no, you're
So I
good.
want to pull up the first clip. So I asked David Pakman a couple of questions, enough to get a segment, and I was hoping I'd be surprised with the Julian answer, but I guess not. But anyway, so here's one of the things I also asked him.
Go.
It's not coming up on the
Joe
screen.
Biden
There it
is a neoliberal corporatist. If you're, I think you mean if you're on the left at all, you would do a lot more criticisms of him. Please hold Joe Biden accountable. My lead story Monday was a criticism of Joe Biden. In the clip today about the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, I mean he pretty much grammar Nazi'd you.
And I'm like,
then
really? That's what you need. And then another one I
said
have
he had we went through all of them.
Oh, there's one more.
No, we went through. I'm pretty sure we did that one. This is the.
Joe Biden is a neoliberal corporatist.
No, that's one.
Why does it not go to the next one when I hit that button?
It's number 2.
KRTD, hold corporate Dems as accountable as Republicans.
And he doesn't even have the.
Yeah, he just gave you a free
answer
ad
that
read
one.
there, pretty much. You paid $2.
Exactly. It's like KRTD Media. Great,
for,
thanks.
I mean, if he does that, if we can just all send super chats to shows like that, actually giving the story, you know, and they just read it like that without putting their own opinion in, it probably wouldn't be bad.
Well, the power of super chats, right? So I don't really, it almost feels like a pay to play speech sort of thing, but I get it.
Yeah.
I get how people make money. Like Combo Couch made 90% of their money from super chats.
Jimmy.
One of my good friends, Kimber Maddox, she goes by like Mean Panda on Twitter, super chatted TYT during Julian's trial back in September and was like, hey, where are you guys at? Like, can you make a story about this? And Anna Kasparian was like, you know, we'll think about it. Like, we got to look into it more.
Yeah, Jimmy did a whole segment on that, pretty sure.
Not saying yes, but trying to just give it a long answer.
They outsourced it to Democracy Now! If you remember that. They outsourced it.
Right. And so that got clipped by Glory Jones, and they just got blasted with it. Like, they got shamed into covering it. So if you are someone that cares about an issue, fucking blow these people's super chats up. Like yes, it supports them, but you can fit a lot of words into a $2 super chat.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I wasn't surprised.
I don't know how much time you have left, Andrew.
I actually gotta get going home soon. I got like a
Of
40
course,
minute drive to my house.
I want to just
Understandable. Plug whatever you want to plug.
let's do that. I just want to thank for joining us. It's a really important story that just came through, and I wanted to make sure we got your thoughts
Absolutely.
on
Thank
it.
you guys so much for having me. I love coming on and hanging out with y'all.
Right.
My name's Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter. The name's in the bottom thing, Andrew ZIGNUND, Zigman. You can find the Action for Assange crew at action_4 Assange. We actually are working on setting up our protest in September, and that's endthedamnwars.org. We're going to be doing multiple events. I have to reach out to the Fuck Censorship crew, but right now it's Free Assange, End the Damn Wars, and most likely Fuck Censorship, and then any other group that wants to get involved. If you are involved with some kind of anti-war or issue-based organization, please reach out to us, and we'd love to see if we can't include you in the fold.
And Krtd is going to begin. I think we talked about this off air. I think I told you we're going to start including Action for Assange's content as some of our rewinds. So we're going to start. They've done hundreds and hundreds of episodes, and we're going to start running some of those over here.
I really appreciate that, by the way. Anything you guys want to use, if you want to clip it, cut it, use 30 seconds or the full, like we used to have old ones that were hours. Like we used to do 5 hours every Wednesday. So by all means, use whatever you want from our library.
Of course. And we're going to make that part of our regular content schedule.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Anyway, thanks for coming on. Where can people find, or start out with, who's coming on this week? Who's coming on next?
So we stream every Tuesday. I'm super bad at self-promotion. We stream every Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Because we figure the notification system's trash. We just put set times so people just know when to tune in.
Right.
So 9 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. Tomorrow we'll have Kara Castronova and potentially 1 or 2 other guests. And we're going to be talking about the detention conditions of BLM activists, as well as the detention conditions of the January 6th protesters from the Capitol, because I was personally at the Capitol January 6th.
Right.
So it's something that's near and dear to my heart, because they have at least a minimum of 38 people still being held pre-trial in Washington, D.C., in total solitary confinement, like 24-hour-a-day lockdown, pre-trial detainees, for literally walking onto a building that the police let people into. So we're going to be diving into that. And the fact that it's a domestic torture program. They're literally violating the Geneva Convention and international and national laws in our Constitution, holding people for almost 6 months at this point, pre-trial and total isolation.
Don't forget, waterboarding isn't torture, it's enhanced interrogation.
Right. Well, hey, before I leave, I want to give people another term. Right. So we learned in 2003 that Nancy Pelosi was part of the Select House Intelligence Committee. As a member of that committee, Nancy Pelosi in 2003 learned about the United States torture programs in Guantanamo Bay and elsewhere. That's where the term waterboarding and enhanced interrogation comes from, is Nancy Pelosi on that Select Intelligence Committee. One of the other things, and there's a lot of methods, one of the other methods that I think people should really talk about because of how brutal it is, waterboarding is literally the least intense version of U.S. torture, and it's called walling. So what walling is they put a collar around someone's neck and they run a chain through a wall. And there's a person in a chair sitting in front of that person that's chained through a wall that asks them a question. If they don't get the answer they want, there's a person on the other side of that wall that slams someone by their neck against the wall by pulling the chain. And that's an acceptable method of interrogation of torture for the United States government to be performing. And that was 10 years ago when we learned that they were doing that. Think about what they're doing now, that it's been over a decade, 11 years since any transparency in a large scale way was shined on.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun even with a safe word, you know?
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's bad.
Another thing is, are we back? I don't know if you reset up the stream keys, so did we able to do that?
I think so, but I can get
yeah,
with you
I got it set up. We should be good
afterwards.
to go for tomorrow.
But
So
yeah, I
tomorrow
want to
you
shout
can
out.
also find.
I want to shout out everyone's Twitters, Andrew's, Misty's. Go find what is it? Sarcasm Stardust, I think.
Stardust.
Right.
Yep.
You know, at KRTD on all our socials. Right, and go find those Discords that will give you those notifications, so Andrew doesn't have to remember, you know, dates and times. So
And everybody join the
also
Jimmy
follow
Dore Discord.
Slow News Day Show.
Yep.
On YouTube and on Twitter.
Definitely.
And also the whole MCSU network.
Yeah,
It's
just was with
News
Franco and
Day,
his Discord. Super good stuff.
Analysis.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a whole group of people there with Nico.
Yeah.
So shout out to those guys because that's my fam.
And
Right,
you guys,
everybody.
you'll be back to streaming on KRTD tomorrow, I guess.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so everybody can check you guys out tomorrow. All our audience, make sure you tune in at is it 9 o'clock tomorrow?
Yep, 9 p.m. Eastern. We
9
usually
p.m.
put like a
Eastern?
10 or 15-minute timer up beforehand.
All right, everybody, tune in.
All right, everybody.
Thank
Peace, love, and soul.
Bye.
KRTD out. All right, you guys are off the air. Yep.